using chord tones to solo, a good way to link them together is to look at the guide tones. Now the guide tones are a smooth way of linking the chord sequence together. The most important notes of a chord usually are the third and the seventh, because they give the chord its sound. The root is important, that's often played by the bass player. The fifth is important, but it doesn't define the sound as much as the third and seventh, but the third and seventh together with the root really define the sound of the chord. Because we're using the sixth chord as chord 1, we're going to use the third and the sixth for chord 1. So if we take the sixth of chord 1, I'm going to follow a line through the chord sequence that moves as smoothly as I can from chord to chord, using only the thirds, the sevenths, and in the case of chord 1, the sixth. So Sam, could you play the chords with me? And let's take that through the A section. So can you hear how smoothly that was moving through the sequence? Between chords 1 and chord 4, the note didn't even change. The sixth of chord 1 became the third of chord 4. So I'm going to play that line again now through the sequence with the rhythm section playing in time. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we're going to do the other guide tone line, the line beginning on the third of the first chord. So the first chord is G6, the third is B. So here are the notes. I'm going to follow through a smooth line from that note. So I'm going to now play that one in time with the rhythm section. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can use those notes when we're improvising. When we're using chord notes to improvise, they help us create melody. They help generate melody because they're a smooth way through the chord sequence. So I'm now going to do some solos just on the A section, using some of those guide tone notes as a basis for melody. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can see how we can generate melody. Have a go at that yourselves over the A section. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to do the third and seventh guide tone lines for the bridge. I'm going to play these with the rhythm section. I'm going to do each one twice. So I'm going to begin with the one starting on the third of the chord and follow that through the sequence. I'm going to play that twice and then I'll begin with the one on the sixth. 1, 2, 3. Now have a go at playing the guide tone lines for the bridge, and once you've got those under your fingers, use them to improvise. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. talk about some approaches to the 2 chords. Remember that in the sequence we have chord 1, chord 4, going back to chord 1, and then 2, 5, 1. Now before that 2 chord, we can approach it with some other chords to make the momentum sound smoother. So one of the more old-fashioned ways of doing that would be to approach it with a diminished chord half a step higher than the 2. So in other words, a diminished chord based on the flat 3 of the key. So if we're in G major, we're talking about a B flat diminished chord. So then we can approach the 2, the A minor 7 chord, with that chord. Let's just hear what that sounds like. Can we play from the beginning of the sequence? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can you hear how that leads nicely on to that 2 chord? So if I was improvising using that, I might reflect that diminished chord in my line. The diminished chord. Okay, let's try a couple of A sections now, and I'll try and build that into my improvisation. 1, 2, 3, 4. Another way of approaching that 2 chord is via its dominant. So if we've got an A minor 7th as the 2 chord, its dominant would be E7. So this time we're going to play an E7 for the whole of the bar before the 2 chord to take us to the 2 chord slowly. This will make the sequence sound a bit more modern, a bit more up to date. So to reflect that, John the drummer is going to play more of a swing groove. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've had an E7 concert before the E minor 7. So we can reflect that in our improvisation as well, using the chord notes of the E7, which will help us get there, or maybe even the minor scale in the key of the chord 2 that we're going to. Now that sounds very complicated, but if we think of the chord 2 as the minor and the E7 is its dominant, so we could actually play a minor scale to get to the chord 2, the harmonic minor in the key of chord 2. If we play that sound but centre around the dominant, around the E, that will get us there very smoothly. I'll give you an example of that with the rhythm section now. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that was using the harmonic minor scale as the key of chord 2 to approach chord 2. over that E7 chord. We don't even have to play the whole scale, we can just inflect it by playing one or two important notes from the scale or the chord to get us there. This time I'm going to play something a little bit less obvious. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to add a couple more chords to the bridge to make that sound a little bit more modern. The first thing we're going to do is in the last 4 bars of the bridge. Do you remember we had 2 bars of A7, the secondary dominant, and then an A minor 7, D7. This time we're going to have, before 1 bar of A7, we're going to have 1 bar of E minor 7. So the sequence will go E minor 7, A7, A minor 7, D7. So putting the E minor 7 before the A7 makes a little 2-5. It's as if we were going to the key of D. But before we get to the key of D, the 2 chord comes the A minor 7 and then the D7. So it just enables it to run a little bit more smoothly. I'm going to ask the rhythm section to play from the bridge a few times. We'll play it over and over again and listen out for that E minor 7 where it comes in the 5th bar. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. If you're a horn player, you can practice that with your arpeggios. You can build that chord into your arpeggios. So I'm going to play that concert E minor 7th chord while I arpeggiate the bridge now. The final thing we're going to do to make our sequence sound a bit more modern is in the bridge, just before that E minor 7 that we put in, that new chord, we're going to approach that with its dominant. So we're going to put a B7 in 2 beats before it. Let's see how that sounds. 1, 2, 3, 4. So when we play the B7, we can incorporate that into our line, approaching the E minor chord. So because it's the dominant, again, we can think in the key of E minor, using the E minor sound to get us to approach that chord. And that will make the sequence just sound a little bit more modern, a bit more sophisticated. So John's been playing 2 basic swing grooves. One's an older style groove, associated probably with the 1920s and the beginning of the 1930s. And the other one is a more modern swing groove, which started to happen during the middle of the 1930s and then went on into the 1940s and the bebop era. So we'll start with the earlier one, John. Could you just maybe play us a bit?
Just play a bit first.
With? So if we just go through the different elements of the kit to work out what's going on. What's going on with the bass drum?
So the bass drum, I'm feathering the bass drum on all 4 beats of the bar, just to add a little bit of weight to what the bass player would be playing.
Can you play that?
Yeah.
Great, thanks. And then how about the hi-hat cymbal?
Then the hi-hats, I'm playing them with my left foot on beats 2 and 4.
Great. And then how about that snare drum? Because that sounds very different to what a modern jazz drummer might do.
Yeah, so what I'm playing is, I'm accenting beats 2 and 4. I'm doing a buzz roll just to emphasise beats 2 and 4, so it sounds like this. Technically it's a 7-stroke roll.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So a 7-stroke roll is 7 strokes to the roll.
Okay.
But then played as a buzz.
And that sounds like a very militaristic way of playing
drum.
the drums.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Is that where it came from?
That is indeed, yeah.
So that's how it developed. Okay, let's hear a bit of that groove again.
Yeah.
So moving to the more modern swing groove, could you give us a demonstration of that, please?
Yeah.
So, could you tell us what's going on with the hi-hat in that groove?
Yes. So I'm closing the hi-hat on beats 2 and 4 like this. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then we start off by playing crotchets with the right hand on the hi-hat. And this is what happens. And then you take it one step further and we introduce the skip beat on beats 2 and 4. One good way of remembering that is by saying the phrase 10 to 2, but you have to remember to start that phrase on beat 2. So 1, 10 to 2, 10 to 2. Let me show you an example. 1, 2, 3, 4. Etc. And you can move that pattern over to the ride cymbal, still closing the hi-hat on beats 2 and 4 with your foot. And it go like this. 1, 2, 1.
Great. And then with the snare drum, you were doing something very different with the snare drum, I think.
Yes, so the snare drum, I basically, in a similar way to feathering the bass drum, I'm feathering the snare drum, but I'm not copying the double bass or anything like that. In fact, it might be more linked to the piano and the rhythm of the piano, and it just adds a rhythmic drive to the person who I am accompanying. So earlier on it was Mick who was soloing. So an example of that, it would be this.
And so you're responding to what's going on around you
Yes.
in the band with the snare drum.
Exactly.
Maybe, Sam, could you just play a little bit with John so that we can hear the interaction between the piano and the snare drum in this swing groove?
1, 2, 3, 4.
So finally we come to the bass drum. John, could you explain what the bass drum would be doing in this group?
So in this sort of more modern setting, it actually functions in a similar way to the snare drum. And I would usually keep it to that feathering dynamic, and you use the same sort of language that you would do on the snare drum, the same sort of rhythmic language, and responding in a similar sort of way. But this time you have two sounds to interact with, so it creates you have two pitches.
Could you give us a demonstration of how the snare and the bass would work
sure.
together within the group? Great, thank you. So if we could hear, maybe with Sam again,
Yeah.
so we can hear the interaction this time between the piano, the snare drum and the bass drum.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4.